Hey there, kids. Danny, Geek Space, Headlines. Welcome back. As you can see, I'm here on vacation right now in Sicily, Stromboli. It's where my dad's from. So I'm a little bit behind on this, but the geek world waits for no man. So we're still gonna do one this week. This week we're talking about Frogwares, which no is not software for your frog. It is in fact a video game developer most responsible for a series of Sherlock Holmes games. Sherlock Holmes games. Sherlock Holmes games. Sherlock Holmes games. On both the PC as well as the Xbox and PS3, and they are currently in a bit of a argument right now with their publisher, Focus Home Interactive, who they're accusing of delisting their games unfairly. So the breakdown of it is this. According to Frogwares, 3 of their games, The Testament of Sherlock Holmes vs. Jack the Ripper, and Mag Runner Dark Pulse, are going to be delisted from multiple storefronts, including PlayStation, Xbox, and possibly Steam, because of the ending of a publishing agreement with their publisher, Focus Home Interactive, and that rather than transfer the publishing materials to Frogwares, they would rather delist the games entirely. According to a statement made by Frogwares, Focus Home Interactive has a company policy that says that they will not transfer content ID or title ID back to a developer who removes their software from the Focus Home software library. Sorry, to take a sip of vacation juice. So, what essentially is happening is that the publishing agreement between Frogwares, the developer of the game, and Focus Home Interactive, the until now publishers of the games, have dissolved. Assuming it was probably a contract that was time-based, so that Frogwares said you have it until the end of 2019, and then after that point, either it transfers to somebody else we've chosen as publisher, or the publishing rights revert back to us. So, why does that matter? Because instead of transferring the storefront's control to Frogwares, Focus Home has instead decided to delist the games entirely. Now, according to Frogwares, this is maybe not a specific breach of contract, but their central argument is essentially that this is bullshit. They don't use any specific language stating what exactly is wrong with it, but it's essentially a pro-developer argument that why do they get control of our games? They had the license for this long, the licenses ran out, please give us control back of our games. And this seems to hold up, although not entirely, because of a point that I'm sure that Focus Home will argue that they've not said anything about yet, but this is where I'm sure they're going to come from. So what I believe is happening here is essentially Focus Home is doing a strategy which I've seen before, which sort of keeps the publisher necessary. A developer, and this happens in any publishing, could be a developer, could be a songwriter, could be anything, is that instead of when a publishing agreement is done, sort of a peaceful transfer of power, they essentially throw up their hands. And if a publisher's job is to juggle plates, throwing up your hands is essentially to drop all plates. Instead of passing them off to a partner like a true juggler would, they instead just throw them on the ground and say, your turn to juggle plates. That was a weird analogy. But the point is this. Instead of having a peaceful transfer of power of all of the storefronts and the publishing materials back to Frogwares, what Focus Home is probably going to say is this, that they are transferring the publishing rights that were initially talked about in the contract back to Frogwares, but that control over those specific storefront pages, the PlayStation page, the Xbox page, and the Steam page, were not specifically named in the contract, that control over those pages are not named in the contract. So by relinquishing publishing rights, they are simply going to delist the games instead of trying to transfer the storefronts to Frogwares control. They're just going to remove the pages entirely and let Frogwares deal with trying to republish the games on those platforms. Now, why is this an issue? Because those games are available on the Xbox 360 and PS3 storefronts, which aren't really around anymore. So if Frogwares wants to get the games back on those, they actually have to receive the content ID and title ID that already exists for those games, because they can't go back and republish a new game on a platform that is now defunct. So the easiest way to allow those games to still be purchasable would be to get the content ID and title ID for those storefront pages transferred to Frogwares. But Focus Home Interactive doesn't want to do that, because then they are essentially relinquishing the need for a publisher at all. The point of a publisher is to help an artist navigate through the business industry side of a complicated. The point of a publisher is to help an artist navigate the difficult side of an industry. So instead of just giving them the tools to do it themselves, they want to make sure that to keep themselves on a job, that they are going to allow the developers to have some input, but that they are going to keep the tools that allow them to achieve these processes locked down. So they're not going to make it easy for them to transfer the storefront, because then there would be no reason for the publisher to exist. So it's a business strategy, really. As scummy as you may think it is a business strategy. And you may think it's a dick move, but as far as we can tell so far, there's nothing illegal about it. Now, admittedly, we don't know the contract. So if there is something specifically in the contract that says that the storefronts need to be transferred to the developer, then there is going to be a legal case here. But there is not anything in dispute so far that says that specifically Frogwares owns the content ID or title ID for the storefronts, which is why they're bringing up Focus Homes' company policy about not transferring those things to developers. So, maybe a dick move. It's very likely a dick move. Kind of a dick move. But the thing about indie publishing is that nobody is quite sure exactly how it works. It's kind of scary how little we know how it works. Jason Schreier wrote a really, really, really great piece about an indie publisher known as Nicalis recently that I highly recommend reading. I'm going to put the link down in the description. And I really recommend you check it out because of the fact that every single indie publishing experience is different. And every single indie publisher is different. And the things they provide are different. And the reasons to have them are different. Unlike larger AAA publishers that are sort of a full package experience and show you how to get from point A to point B and often own the development teams, publishers that partner with a smaller development team need to provide certain things, but are more on a slim a la carte type of service. Because you may need certain things, you may need social media, you may need publishing, but you may not need like media representation or something. You know, that's the difference, is that you may not need everything that a AAA developer would need from their publisher. The other thing is that publishers who work with indie developers kind of know that they can control certain things because of the fact that materials and power is sort of limited in indie development teams. Let's say you're working at Insomniac, assuming that they were still independent. If Sony didn't give you what you want, you're Insomniac Games. You sort of have the ability to leverage your pedigree, your sales, to work with a better publisher who might give you what you want. With indie teams, especially untested indie teams, they don't have the same amount of power. The other thing that's very important is that they don't have the manpower either. Indie developers who have teams of tens people maximum, you know, if an indie team has 20 people, it's a big indie team a lot of the time. If an indie developer has maybe 6 people, they can't expend the whole resource of a whole person even trying to publish the game. They don't have that sort of resource, so they need a publisher to work with them so that somebody else can manage that side of it because they're too busy making the game. So indie publishers know this, and they're able to sort of pressure indie developers into situations. Now, I'm not saying Focus Home is manipulative. I'm not even saying Nicalis is manipulative, although that report was very telling. I am saying is that there is a propensity for manipulation here because indie publishers or indie development publishers know that they are in a situation where they often have the power in a relationship. I'm not saying they always abuse that power, but nonetheless, that power exists. So it's important that we sort of keep these people on their toes. You know, that when things like this happen, that we look at the facts. I'm not saying Focus Home is doing anything illegal or wrong here, or even manipulative. For all I know, it maybe Frogwares was being incooperative or whatever. But we need to know that these things are happening because of the fact that working like this and screwing over developers who are usually the lowest power ranking, despite the fact that they are the people making the games, is going to make our industry worse. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, I'm gonna keep working on my vacation and my vacation hairdo, as you can tell. So yeah, beautiful, ain't it? I love Stromboli, Sicily. Anyway, it's been headlines. Come back, come back next week. I'll have a headline for you, maybe. Probably less sand. Who knows? Actually, who knows? Maybe I'll throw some sand in here. No, I won't. I'm not gonna get any sand. I hate sand. It's coarse. It's everywhere.